Welcome back. We are on week 12, episode 12 of the Bottomless podcast. If you're just tuning in for the first time, welcome and thank you, and we hope you stick around. If you are a return listener, Tiffany, Marshall, Caleb, anyone else, welcome back, and we love you guys. You guys are like family, and we hope you stick around as well. Shout out to everyone on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, or anywhere else you're tuning in from. For introductions, my name is Kevin, and these two beautiful people are...
Vincent.
Leslie.
Kevin is... We're keeping all of this.
Episode's over.
Episode over. Cut.
Thank you for tuning into the...
Please subscribe. My name is Kevin. I'm from Floribama. I live in Floribama. Vince lives in LA, but he is currently speaking to us from North Kakalaki. And Leslie is currently speaking to us and lives in Hawaii.
Nice.
And we're about 1 week out from us all being here together, so there's a lot of joy in the room.
Excitement, because our next episode, literally, if we can pull it off, is going to be all of us live. Not live as in like we're broadcasting live, but like all of us in the same room and not having to speak through screens.
With a live studio audience.
Yeah.
Jojo and Evan.
Yeah.
These Funko figures, our live studio audience. Behind Vincent, there's just a wall of Funko figures because he's at a friend's house who collects them, which is cool.
Yeah,
Shout out to Joe for letting me record here.
Yeah.
So, I guess we have a lot of fun stuff to discuss, but it wouldn't be a bottomless episode if we didn't start a little dark and heavy. So I wanted to ask your guys' opinions about the recent spree of capital punishment executions that have been going on. If y'all don't know, this year our lovely administration resumed federal executions of people which had been on pause for, I think, like a decade. And it started in July, and basically it's kind of unprecedented. Apparently it's been over a century since a lame duck president has done executions. So, I mean, I have a lot of opinions on it, but I just think it's notable, just the how punitive this administration is. And it does give me some sick hope that we're finally getting rid of all my shit talking aside about Biden. Like I'm getting increasingly more cynical day to day about the next administration, but I'm very happy that we're getting rid of an administration that seems to like almost take pleasure and the punitive and like appealing to our worst sensibilities. But yeah, just curious your guys' thoughts. I know the death penalty is kind of a spicy topic, so just wanted to see what kind of pots I could stir today.
Well, I honestly don't have like a lot of thoughts. The death penalty is something I honestly have never really learned in depth about, or like, engaged in a serious, in the way that would be needed to have a lot of opinions on it. But I will say, in preparation for this episode, Vincent sent an article, a very short article, about it, and it's kind of sickening. I don't think, once again, it's like I'm saying this here and now, and having acknowledged what I just acknowledged, I don't think I would ever be in a place where I agree with the death penalty in general as a concept. And I didn't know that this spree of executions was happening as he's on his way out, and it's just sickening. And you could go into all the different arguments, but like at the core of it, one big, just the hypocrisy, right, of like people having this idea of like, well, it's about justice, and like that meaning ending somebody's life in a system that is so flawed, as opposed to any momentum toward uplifting people. Like it's about killing people who have done things that are wrong, but also once again within a system that is so flawed and that makes mistakes, right? And that's like somebody's life, like choosing, like you're ending somebody's life in a system that's so incredibly flawed and biased. And
correct me if I'm wrong. I saw this on Twitter. Are the people getting executed disproportionately black?
I don't know about this specific string, but I know that's the case for capital punishment writ large.
Disgusting.
Yeah, including like people that get exonerated after the fact or have like botched executions.
Disgusting. And the fact in that short article Vincent said, sorry, Kevin, real quick, that I didn't know that. I feel like it's worth for listeners who didn't know, like even the whole argument of like, well, it's about justice for the victims' families and how in the person who was most recently executed, like the victim's family, because this person had, I guess, murdered 2 people, and the victim's family had explicitly said, like, we don't want him to die. Like, we don't want him to be executed. And it was like forced forward. It's just disgusting.
Oh, gosh, it's such a heavy topic. I saw it.
Bottomless.
Bottomless. I saw Kim Kardashian tweeting about that specific inmate who Leslie was referring to, whose family of the victim said they didn't want him executed. And then I saw tweets on Twitter about the current administration is doing the whole lame duck period and the most executions in 10 years, and it hadn't happened. They're disproportionately black. And if anything I'm saying is incorrect, please fact check me in the comment section, or just hit me directly if you have my number, because I don't want to spew sensationalized rhetoric that is false. I do care for truth. So if what I'm saying, if the information I received is accurate, that the number of people are disproportionately black, then yeah, I think there's, like Leslie said, disgusting. There's a gravity on my soul that I feel, knowing that even though in a lot of ways, if you take Kevin Ortiz back to 2016 with the information he had in 2016 and nothing further, I still would have voted for Trump like I did. There is now a heaviness and a gravity on my soul that I never felt before about the seriousness of one person's vote, the ethical responsibility of one person's vote, of voting someone, wishing someone into the White House, knowing that that administration, that president, that vote you cast for that person resulted in the capital punishment of persons, the lot of which were disproportionately black. So I'm just gonna say there is a grief and a heaviness on my soul, and there's a sense of gravity linked to responsibility of, man, like rappers are getting shot every day right now. Rappers are dying every day right now from getting robbed, and that grieves my soul as well. But it's like the jungle, like Vince kind of knows, and Leslie probably knows to some extent as well. Like when you're in certain environments, in certain cities, in certain places of America, it's literally a jungle. You would never walk into an actual jungle environment in Africa where there's lions and tigers and shit and just act like it's all safety. In the same way, these rappers are living in environments, and these black people in America are living in Chicago, Atlanta, New Jersey, are living in environments that are like jungles where you can get killed and shot for your chain or for your car. And that grieves my soul as well. But there's just a certain level of gravity that I'm having right now about the president murdering disproportionately black people in America. That, even to 2020, with as an advanced country as we are in technology, I will say our legacy as a country, as Americans, as an identity, as a whole, our legacy, one of our legacies is disproportionately murdering and mistreating the black community. And cosmically, karmically, however you want to divvy up religion or science, or however you want to look at it, we will not be excused as Americans, as a country, for what we did to black people.
I think it's interesting you say legacy, and also I want to acknowledge it's black and brown people, but also people um, that are poor of all color, right? Like it applies the same, like the inability to get some sense of representation. Like rich people that are doing fucked up
Yeah.
shit, they're not
Yep.
getting the death penalty. They're getting the best lawyers. I
Yep.
mean, I just watched The Undoing, so I'm basically an expert on the criminal justice system. Um,
Not.
but it's true, right? Like, so I want to acknowledge that too. It's people
Oh,
that are
OJ
poor of
Simpson
all
got
colors.
off. OJ
Right,
Simpson got
right.
off.
But I think it's cool you said legacy because it's interesting that this is like lame duck presidency, meaning that Trump has already been defeated. He's on his way out, and this is what his priority is on the way out. Like this is what his obviously he's doing other things like conspiracy theorizing
Undermining
over
our very democracy.
like that. But it's just interesting, like in a way, like this is his priority in his legacy, and how fucked up is it that we like idolize, well, some people idolize state sanctioned violence and executions, and those same people in the same breath will turn around and pearl clutch about violence in the inner city and black on black crime. And it's like you're doing that. It's like what's different. The difference is
I lock my car door when black people walk by. I'm
Shut
trying.
up, Kevin.
I'm not doing this.
Shut
I'm not.
up. You can't
joking.
joke like that.
Why? Thank you for listening to the Bottomless Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Bottomless Podcast.
I'm joking.
Yeah, I guess I'll leave it with like a final note because this isn't the main topic today. But I think one thing that I have thought about and would be good for people to think about is, do we really want to give people like the cartoon villain that is William Barr or Donald Trump himself the driver's seat of state sanctioned violence? Like however you feel about the death penalty, what you're doing is giving the theoretical commander-in-chief the driver's seat and enacting state sanctioned violence. And is that something that you're really comfortable with? And I think this administration for me has given me a bit of a new perspective of what that means, even when it comes to like the worst people in our society, which are I don't mean to like do air quotes, like some of them are unequivocally the worst in our society. But do I really want to give the state the ability to kill, cold blood execute people? So on that,
Once
really
again, within a system that is so flawed and so biased and so like, yeah.
absolutely.
Sorry, go ahead.
So on that heavy note, today's actually going to be a bit more fun than usual. I think we spent this whole couple of months this season really complaining about everything that we can get our hands on, and just really spending hours screaming about things like death and religion, the patriarchy, mental health, race. And I wanted to do a bit of a callback to something that Leslie pointed out early in our episodes about the ways in which we just hyper focus, and it just feels good to focus on the things that we find unideal about our society, and this this posture towards really loving dystopian art and thinking about the ways in which that we are, bottoming out to some sort of destruction, et cetera, myself included. I love the dark shit, but we haven't really spent much time talking on these episodes about like what are we looking forward to, like what are we saying yes to, what are we really prescribing. So today we're gonna talk about utopia.
Utopia.
Yeah,
We're gonna dream out loud together.
yeah. And I think this will be hopefully interesting, especially because, again, I don't think there is enough time spent really daydreaming about what we should be fighting towards. We're just so focused on what we're fighting against, and for good reason. It's 2020, fucking the George Floyd protests. Like, I get it. But why not spend some time being a bit positive and dreaming a bit? So, yeah, I guess to start us off, where does y'all's mind go to when you think of utopia? Like, what does that mean to you? What do you naturally imagine?
as just the concept, right? Like not getting into the specifics yet.
Yeah, just the concept.
Do you want to start, Vincent? Because I feel like you tend to ask and then have less space at the end of me and Kevin, who tend to be a little more verbose. So maybe you should start.
I think for me, um, I think where my mind has previously gone, first is like heaven. As a former Christian, I think that's like my first idea of like what utopia is, right? Like this place where there's no more suffering, no more pain. You just spend your time worshiping God, song and dance forever and eternity. And I think that definitely impacts how I think of utopia just as a knee-jerk reaction. Also, there's this weird obsession that I think is unique to like white people, like white Southerners, like my white family. But there's this like pastoral utopia of a time that's passed where things were like super simple and we like farmed all our own shit and then we just spent time with our family at night. And so those types of images are like the first things that pop up to my mind when I think of utopia. Those like cinematic scene of being somewhere out in like Troy, North Carolina with just my family and just kicking it up. Obviously, that's not utopia to me anymore, but I mean, those are the type of images that come to my mind when I hear utopia.
Nah, Leslie, you going first.
Nah, Kevin looked like he got something to say.
Kevin is turning red as Bob the Tomato over there.
What type of white ass crackery is Troy, North Carolina? What type of utopia? Utopia is North Carolina. If you don't get that crackery, head assery, haberdashery,
I know you're not
bullshit.
talking alien technology head ass. Go and tell us about the alien universe that you.
Troy? I don't even know where Troy is. I didn't know Troy was a city in North Carolina.
Oh, it's not a city.
My point proven exactly.
Oh, it's not a city.
They ain't got Wi-Fi in Troy. They ain't got a gas station in Troy. It's a mom and pop shop.
They do have a gas station.
A bait and tackle shop with a gas pump. Nah, Leslie, what's good? What's good with your utopia, Leslie?
All right, then we'll just have to cut this because I just took a bite and I need to chew it. Sorry.
No, you're good. Kevin can go.
Utopia. Utopia.
Just as the concept where your mind goes.
Yeah.
It's a concept that has to be. It's more of a textbook definition than it is a played out representation. And the textbook definition is a world in which all people, irrespective of or regardless of race, creed, color, class, can participate at an equal footing with an equal level of dignity, humanity, and happiness. And there's a potential and a possibility for ever increasing happiness and joy and satisfaction, but also meaning and significance and strive. Like, I think back to when I use a story to explain the when I say meaning and significance and striving. I think I used to think of utopia as like, I'll float in the ocean all day eating a cupcake in the sunlight, and like there would be no pain and no wanting, and like I'll just like my life will be just happy listening to Canon and D on repeat. And then I realized later on,
like Adam and Eve, like Garden of Life.
Like, yeah, this like very strange misconstrued idea of like zero responsibility, zero pain. And then I realized as I went further in life, like, no. Striving and yearning and forlorning and desiring but not having contributes to the idea of like satisfaction. So what I mean is there was a time that I was doing CrossFit and there was an exercise called the overhead squat. And it's a very difficult exercise. It's an Olympic exercise, and it's very difficult to perform because I like saying irregardless because like grammatical freaks
That's
are like
actually been like officially now named a word. interestingly. So
Look at my
because
people.
language is always evolving and it responds to how people use it. So even though technically it's like grammar heads would be like, wow, it's like that's how people use it, and it does have a slightly different meaning than regardless, because people add the ear to add a level of emphasis that isn't there without, even if you're going to stick strictly to like what ear means, it's a double negative.
Come on,
So
Chomsky.
so irregardless, um, there was this exercise that is like irregardless of weight, it's extremely difficult to perform because of mobility, stability within workout in your body, like body awareness. And so I was doing this workout and I was like on round 5 and my body's worn down to its threshold, to like its physical capacity. Like even if my mind has juices in the tank to expend, my physical nature cannot put out anything more. And I'm running to this barbell that has a 45-pound weight on each side, I think, or whatever it was. And if anyone knows just that movement, you grab the bar, you throw it above your head, you're going down for the squat, and sheer strength of your arms shaking, and you're trying to squat down, and your balance giving out, your body's screaming, like literally your shoulders are shaking. And the whole gym, like it was like 20 of us, were done with the workout. So now they're watching me, and it's like this moment of like they're cheering me on, like, all right, you got this, let's go. I failed the first time. I'm like, fuck. So I take a second, I walk away, and I shake my shoulders down. I'm like, and I'm like on the verge of tears, but not because I'm embarrassed, not because I'm sad, not because I'm like ashamed. There is this there has now been developed in this workout and in my testosterone and my aggression, a romantic relationship between me and completing this workout and getting this lift. It's like this accomplished, it's like this romantic thing of like a football player against all odds, the underdog, and they're trying to get that ball to the end zone, or this gymnast who's like trying to land this extremely complicated move in front of the judges and get a 10-10-10 from all the judges to beat the last person who just got like a 9.9 from all the. And so I put it down. I go for the second time. I do it, and I fail again. And then like my friend comes up to me. You guys know him, David Choi, who was like, who caught me in the CrossFit. He's like, Kev, you got to focus, calm down, still your mind. You got this. Go
Like
go
the
for it
angel
again.
Gabriel entering.
Yeah, no.
That is David Choi.
So he does the whole angel Gabriel thing to me, looks me in the face, goes, Kev, you got this, Kev. So like my mentor in life with fitness goes, you got this, encouragement. I'm in this like zened out place. I grab it for the third time. I throw it up above my head, and I go down for the squat, and I fail for the third and final time. To this date, that was probably when I was 21, 22. To this date, I have never felt a more meaningful moment in my life. I failed. Nothing has ever felt as more romantic of a pursuit in my life than driving my physical, mental, emotional capacities to their threshold and wanting so badly to accomplish this goal that I set for myself. But I failed. But it's because never in my life had I genuinely known in any other arena, academically, artistically, socially, a genuine threshold of I'm trying with every fiber and atom in my being to accomplish this, and I can't. You know your limitations. And so I think utopia has to encompass that element of a striving for, a yearning for, a desiring for, an ever grasping and reaching towards something greater and something more. So it has to encompass this idea where everyone has this fullness of dignity and fulfillment and an equal footing to strive towards and ahead in life and a pursuit of happiness. But it has to encompass this idea of ever increasing joy, ever increasing satisfaction, ever increasing meaning and significance and tangible, like felt wanting for more, and the possibility that it can be attained, but there has to be effort exerted in order to attain it.
Wow, I love that. And such a different image. I love our I went to the farm and you went to the gym. Leslie, where does your mind go?
first, I just want to acknowledge something I was thinking about while Kevin was talking is that I want to thank you, Vincent, for in the process of this podcast teaching me to be a better listener, because I was thinking about how, honestly, previous to this podcast, I might have gotten a little stressed listening to Kevin because this is annoying and I'm admitting this is wrong. No, not because of who Kevin is, but because I would have been less open to creating certain types of space that I think Vincent creates. And I don't know, like in the sense of like listening to you, I was able to just totally focus on what you were saying and see and like put the effort in for myself to connect how what you were saying connected to the prompt. Whereas I think previous to this podcast, if I hadn't, it would have taken more effort for me to just listen in that way, as opposed to sort of being like, ooh, it seems like we're like veering off a little bit and like spending a long time on something that doesn't necessarily get us to like what we're really talking about, and acknowledging that flaw in myself and Kevin, I'll make sure to share something you've taught me later in the episode, because it isn't just but it made me think of this like in this moment, and I love what you said. It's beautiful. Yeah,
Thank you.
yes. So where my mind went is Vincent and Kevin and I had thrown around the idea of like talking about specific pieces of art that attempt to depict utopian societies. And I was just like so nonplussed about that. And I was thinking about why, and it relates to where my mind goes with utopia. And it's because I've actually never seen a piece of art that in my mind actually does depict utopia, which, being fair, I haven't engaged with some of the like better known pieces. Like I think Vincent mentioned Star Trek is supposed to, and like I've never watched a single episode. And also I probably wouldn't, especially like with that lens, because like that's just so boring as shit. Like a bunch of white people in space. Like, no, I'm not interested in that. For no,
How dare you?
So anyway, but where my mind goes is to the idea, and I'm just looking at my notes here, of engaging as fully as I can in an ever-growing kaleidoscope of all the things that I can. And then those things actually do lead into what we'll talk about later in the episode, which is like the actual practicals of what our ideas of utopia would look like, and then mechanisms to get us there. Because you think about the things you can engage with as a human on Earth, relationships with other humans and other animals, the Earth itself. And then this third category, which like loosely you could say like are man-made things. So like art, which tends to be thought of as less utilitarian, heavy air quotes, in like a really certain lens. Tools and infrastructure, and then like the collective and ever expanding fields of knowledge that we record, like science and mathematics and history. And so that's where my mind goes with utopia. Taking it how you will. It is so interesting to hear where each of us kind of ping to immediately. And it just basically deals with, I think, that in engaging closely in any of these things, you naturally do start to see the way that oh, sorry, hold on, wait. This little shot is kicking in. Hang on. We can cut this right.
Honestly, I didn't want to say anything, but my wine started kicking in. I was like, oh no, I should have slowed my roll.
It's lit.
I was like, am I slurring my words?
It's
like,
You're not. Okay, so for example, closely engaging in relationships to ever increasingly the fullest that you can, you naturally, outside of ever picking up a book, will learn about racism and the patriarchy, sexism, and heteronormativity, and classism, and hierarchy in all of its forms. And you will, right? And you will gain a kind of knowledge that you can never learn in a book. And both are important. But again, that's why engaging in all of these facets that you can engage in my mind, is utopian. And also, if you engage closely with the earth in all the senses that can mean, you will naturally see that the way we currently treat the earth and exist in relation to it is not in harmony with how it would function without our dominant approach. So recently I actually met somebody who's getting their PhD in sustainable fishing, as it is informed by like indigenous Hawaiian practices. And something that he said that stuck out so much to me was the idea that one basic principle that's floated in a lot of circles talking about sustainability, and specifically in relation to fishing, is the idea that we should harvest and consume resources as humans as informed by like just literally looking at like how their capacity to fill us. So something like caviar, for example, like it's obvious like nobody's gonna make a meal out of fish eggs, and yet because they have been like treated as a delicacy, we just like, oh well, because we want it and we like it, we must change the natural rhythms and structures of this earth that we are one tiny part of the total ecosystem of, to create a bunch more of something that we want, as opposed to like how it's so simple, but it's actually so like shaking, at least to me, to think about like, what if we just treated resources as, how do they naturally relate to us? Because right, everybody, it's not, the problem is not that we need resources. Every living thing on earth needs and consumes and find ways to adapt to gain the resources that they need. But I think it just ties back to what I've said in several other episodes, which is this idea that we as humans tend to think that because we have evolved one certain kind of intelligence, that the way we apply it is automatically the best way, and that it's just because we're like smarter than everyone else. That's just the natural result, right? As opposed to like any accountability or thinking about like, how does our type of intelligence, how could it actually fit into the ecosystem on micro and macro scales that we are a part of, whether we like it or not. And clearly we have not, as clearly evidenced by the fact that if drastic changes aren't made, like, we are going to single-handedly destroy the earth.
Ooh.
Utopia.
Yeah, no.
Thank you to Sky Vodka from Costco for sponsoring this episode.
Oh yeah,
not sponsored.
It's the same bottle that's been sponsoring this whole season. Okay.
That Sky Vodka carried us to the Utopia episode, so shout out to Sky.
Carried.
So there's a lot. Also, I'm on the same wave as Leslie.
I'm the only
Sips
sober
wine.
one on
No,
the
Kevin said he had already been drinking like way before this. Also,
No,
kids, you don't need to drink to have a good time, okay? Or think like
That's a lie. That's a lie. Kids drink.
This is a positive episode. Let's not go on this.
Drink
let's not
off
go down this path. Yeah. Alcoholism season 2 coming. Never mind. No, I think that's a good transition to like really getting into some more details. And this is the hard part, to be honest. I think. Well, Leslie went kind of granular, but I know for me, it took me a while to have a vision of like my ideal world life of utopia that was more than just this high level things feel good, there's no sadness, maybe it's heaven, maybe it's whatever, right? But I will say I think my radicalization of the past couple of years has been able to give me a bit more more types of conversations that are more specific in building out the world that I want to live in. And I'm reminded because of like the whole point of like the caviar, right? I think that's specifically indicative of a society that's based purely on profit and the accumulation of wealth. So I guess I want to push us to be more specific, and to start it off for me, my specific utopia is a world where success isn't measured in profit at all. Like profit is not the center of what is powerful, what is successful. Obviously, in stark contrast, like when we talk about the gross domestic
Stark contrast.
Oh no.
GDP.
Sky, don't ever sponsor us again. I'm just kidding. No, but I think that's the thing, right? Because if it's based off, if our controls for success are like nutrition, caviar, at least my understanding, for the amount of work it would take to just eat caviar, produce it, distribute it, wouldn't be near the top of the list, right? So for me, my utopia specifically would be some sort of society where we are asking ourselves, like, what's the quality of our mental health? What's the quality of nutrition? What's the quality of our relationships with each other? What's the quality, like, what's our synergy with each other, with the earth, with water? And these would be the type of things that we would fucking build stock markets out of, right? Like, fuck the NASDAQ. That's why.
Want stock markets?
No, that's
Okay.
I won't. Yeah, no,
Maybe the metaphorical stock markets. Yeah.
But I think that's why I love Kevin's example so much, because nothing about that struggle to do that gym shit that I would never do, nothing about that was motivated by you making money. Like, not that wasn't what like edified your soul. It was like the yearning, the striving for like you said, a romantic pursuit, which I think is like human nature. I don't think striving to make money to survive is human nature. So for me, first thing, and let me know if that's still too abstract. Like I'm happy to, I'd be fun to like build this out more. But the first thing is our markers of success in society are hard turned away from profit and towards things that we as a society have agreed actually matter. Education being another one, healthcare. These things are the things where you listen to fucking press conferences and say, how healthy are we? Like, how educated are we? And to me, that's utopia. That's like an exciting world. And it doesn't feel that removed. Like, it feels like something that's not fiction. That's something that we can actually strive to. Thoughts?
Listen, I was getting ready mentally this morning for this conversation, and full disclosure, I'm like my natural thoughts and my natural disposition, left alone to my own devices, I'm very like capitalistic, Republican, conservative, Christian, prejudice. So as like there's all these natural like elitist, bourgeois.
I'm so
like,
excited for this conversation. You have no idea. This is like, I don't want to talk to a fucking commie because we'll agree on it's boring. I mean, that's not true. I mean, I do want to talk, but this kind of conversation is different, and it's exciting to me.
No, so yeah, so my natural like that, and I agree, because I was thinking about anticipating this conversation, and I was like, man, there's just like the idea of utopia from someone who has those predispositions of what I just listed is like so I was trying to like prepare how I'm gonna be honest and be forthcoming, but also be like, create space and allow space for people with differing views. So as Vince is talking, like, man, like I'm competitive and I like the idea of profit and I like the idea of a free market system and I like the idea of like, I like these ideas, but when it was brought to my attention that the current way that it is structured in America dispossesses and marginalizes people, is when I began to realize like, oh, like, yeah, like you don't realize if you're focusing on the winner in a capitalistic system of the people who do well, and you don't see the people who are dispossessed financially, socially, then
Especially
yes,
when it's a system that inherently makes the winners smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller percentage of society at expense of the broader and broader and broader majority of society.
that's a fact. So it was, this is a clinic. Listening to Leslie and Vincent, who have wild, like, it's not even ideological. It's not like Leslie and Vincent went to some college and some professor brainwashed them. Like, who they are, born out of their mother's wombs, their temperament, their makeup,
Wombs.
Shout out Tanya.
their biological
Shout out Cindy.
Hey,
they're who they are in the fabric. And like you pull apart the fabric of a cloth, like you take a thread out of a quilt and you start pulling it until the whole thing is like that strand all the way down to the crop, that from the soil, that like who they are. They believe this. It's who they are. This isn't some propaganda that they were this is who they are. Like, they have a genuine concern for people. They have a genuine concern for life and for the planet and for species that aren't human. So hearing this, I sit here and I go, man, I have my inclinations and my dispositions. And then hearing them makes me go, oh, like, my inclinations and my dispositions make me blind to the things that are most important to them, which are this vast majority of people who can be and are very much so dispossessed by a capitalistic competitive system. And so hearing what you're saying is like, I hear it, and the parts of me that focus on the winners and that doesn't take into consideration the losers or the people who are dispossessed and marginalized is like, no, like, we got to have competition and we got to have winners. Like, I hate the idea of participation trophies.
oh, same.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Because
Yeah.
every soccer mom who was like, "Oh,"
And for the record, fuck you, boomers. You're the ones that gave us the trophies.
Facts.
Don't give us the trophies and then be mad.
Facts.
Never mind.
Okay,
So, like,
taking back the shout outs to our moms. Okay.
Besides you, Tanya. Besides you, you're good. You're good.
not excluding Tanya, but then
And
but
your
then there's
aunt.
there's the other
follows
part of
And you, Aunt Carol.
not on because she follows the pot.
This aunt follows us, and we bring it up every episode because we love it. We love
Auntie,
you, Aunt
Auntie
Carol.
Carol,
Auntie Carol
Vince's views do
is
not
one of the
reflect.
cool kids.
They do not reflect the views of me and Leslie. Vince stands alone. So no, there's points that Vince and Leslie bring up that I go, oh yeah, like, man, put yourself in a position of life, whether ethnically, whether in a country you live in. Like, imagine if you were in Gaza getting bombed.
Honestly, it's not anyone listening is in that position. Like, if we're talking like the vast majority of people, like whether it's
let's
black,
be clear.
brown.
Let's be clear. If you live in America, there is a disproportionate difference to your privilege in life compared to someone living in Gaza.
Oh, absolutely. But
I don't care who you are in America. Let's be clear. I studied Middle East for 16 months, maybe 20. Let's be clear. I don't give a flying fuck who you are, black. And if you are in the land of America, and Vince is right, but there is a disproportionate difference to your privilege, black or white, than to someone living in Gaza.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's
the global South in general.
That the global, that's a good way to put it. So I sit here and I go, like, man, like, Kevin, put yourself, like, that's humanity, isn't it? Humanity is putting yourself in a human puts themselves in the position of a robot goes, no, we're winning and we're excelling and we're progressing and we're advancing. Why would I stop to look at the lesser than, the aforementioned? A human is supposed to stop and go, what if that was you? Because that might be your kids or your great. So this is an exercise in utopia of, like, I hear what Vince is saying and I go, okay, how do I, then let me try to do this now, because Vince's question was, what is a granular definition of utopia? I hear what Vince is saying, and this is a clinic and an exercise in how do I now reconstruct my utopia, taking into consideration the views and opinions of people who fundamentally think different than I do. So granularly, in a very fine print definition of utopia, like, yeah, I'm like unashamedly, unabashedly, I'm a Christian. So let me just try to hop into that definition real quick. I don't think utopia is sitting in the clouds and a bunch of angels playing harps and you singing all day to God. Yeah. I think the way society is set up now, with technology and cities and development and progression and evolution and planets and transportation, and I think all of these things were supposed to, I think the way the world is set up now, sans pain, homeless, famine, war, disease, all these things that are very forefront on the mind of people we would call socialists and these heart issues for those who we like stigmatize as like communists. I think those are the first addressed issues in the Bible. There will be no hurt. There will be no dispossessed. The lion will eat with the lamb. The baby can play with the snake and not get bit. Like, there's these ideas of no one being in hunger, no war, the nation won't rise against nation. There's this idea in the scriptures, if you are a Christian who understands your Bible, that there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth in which there's supposed to be cities and technology and developments, and like they're supposed, like how the world is now, sans every fucked up way that our heart aches over how life is. Like Leslie saying, like, man, this is excess. Why the fuck are we eating fish eggs? What the fuck? There's kids in Africa starving, or no, not fuck starving. There are kids in third world countries dying of diarrhea when we have Pepto-Bismol. Why are we eating fish eggs? We are not advanced as a civilization. I don't give a fuck if Elon Musk puts us on Pluto. If one person is fucked up or enslaved, the whole world is not right. So if kids in Africa are dying because of diarrhea, the world is not right. I don't give a fuck. That the fact that you can go to the gas station and get Pepto-Bismol doesn't mean shit if there's kids in Africa and Brazil dying of diarrhea. So I look at it and I go, yeah, the biblical, not the Western 2020 Christian interpretation of a utopia for me is God comes down, snaps his finger and goes, we're going to start over. Technology, cities, civilization, skyscrapers, arts, like everything you can think of currently that brings joy to your soul, combined with a yearning and a striving for more and the potential and possibility to have more. Think of anything, a composer going, I'm going to create a symphony this year that's better than the symphony I created last year, or better than the symphony that the composer 2,000 years that I studied, Ludwig van Beethoven, created 2,000. I'm going to create a symphony that makes people cry in beauty more than that, heart-aching beauty. I'm going to, a striving in every facet, art, food, society, so like social relations, like Leslie said, caring for the planet, like Vince said, having press conferences on, are we mentally healthy? Are our families doing good? What's a better way we can improve the social status and the interaction between not only human to human, but human to every other species, human to the planet? My interpretation and what I was biblically taught by my pastor was that's the heaven, because the Revelations talks about new heaven, new earth. It was never meant to be clouds and angels and harps. It was supposed to be what it is now. What it is now was supposed to be a shell and a broken version of what it's going to be. And when it comes down, when in Kevin's interpretation, when Jesus comes down, he goes, okay, now that I have what I want, let's start over. And we get to experience everything we're experiencing now, relationships and love and life in the fullest in every way we want to experience it now, but in an unbroken simulation that doesn't have all of this fucked up reality to where there's war and dispossession and all of these heart-wrenching realities that we have to reckon with in 2020.
Yeah, that was so beautiful, Kevin. And this is so fun. Yeah, hearing your guys' thoughts. I will share in the more granular sense. First, a quick response to something Vincent mentioned and something we talked a bit about in our preparation for this episode, which is the idea of utopian world building as connected to achievable means versus like it being this totally alien concept or like total fiction. And I want to real quick say that I do think it connects back to a quote that I did mention in that earlier episode when we talked about the actual utility and necessity of utopian dreaming, which is a quote by Eduardo something. I didn't write his name down. Sorry, Eduardo. But it's utopia is on the horizon. I move 2 steps closer. It moves 2 steps further away. I walk another 10 steps and the horizon runs 10 steps further away. As much as I may walk, I'll never reach it. So what's the point of utopia? The point is this, to keep walking. And I really resonate that. And it's not because I don't think that utopia is and should be achievable. It's more like I think that we as a society tend to severely underengage in visioning based purely on what we instinctually desire and yearn for outside of what we know to be achievable. And it's similar to my idea that I raised when we talked about like curiosity, right? And when I said I feel like because we've been told what there is to know about a subject and what there is to learn, it atrophies that muscle of like what do we actually wonder about. I think in the same way there's just so much less space created for like, hey, we as humans we have wild dreams and we've done wild things, right? And it tends to be the case, especially if you look at our little chunk of time, that those dreams are informed by a capitalist society that values profit above all else. And I think that because there is so much that we're coming up against to think of an alternative reality, let alone a utopian alternative reality, so much of that dreaming tends to be in context of like achievable, practicable steps that would not just be what's the end goal, but like how do we get there? But I think that there is a necessity for dreaming. Damn, my finger pointing is coming out. But there's a necessity for dreaming that is not informed by what's practical and achievable. And you have to have that. And it's because what is in front of us to achieve any of the things either of you guys have talked about is monumental, right? And would take so much work. It would take, I think, probably generations of work. But if you dream with those constraints in place, you're not actually dreaming. And I think there's so much value in each of us just taking stock, like Kevin just said, right? Like taking stock of, like, he took stock of, like, well, the way that he dreams of it is informed by, he mentioned several actually structures that he has been socialized into, like a capitalist society, like a classist society, like all these things. And it's like, if you just think, like, what do I actually, like, what sounds like paradise to me outside of all the things I've been socialized into, I think we probably have more in common than we tend to think of if we limit ourselves to practical, achievable means to get there. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
But I
Vince-
just real quick, Leslie really reminded me of this quote that I tried to service a lot of work, but from Oscar Wilde that I think kind of speaks to what she was saying, right? And the quote is, "A map of the world that does not include utopia is not worth even glancing at, for it leaves out the one country at which humanity is always landing. And when humanity lands there, it looks out and seeing a better country sets sail. Progress is the realization of utopias." Um,
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out to Oscar Wilde and the Transcendentalists. Um, so to quickly answer the rest of your question, Vincent. Also, I didn't mean to be dismissive of that quote. We had a whole conversation off pod about it. Okay, I love the quote.
You weren't dismissive. You're good. You're good. You're good.
Okay, so to quickly finish answering, I would say that it actually isn't super granular yet, but I think we'll probably get to that. More head on answering, like, what is my idea of utopia is where the purpose of work is not to survive, it's to thrive, and it's to push us forward into more truth and beauty. And there's this term that I've seen popping up quite a bit recently in things I've been reading and engaging with, of like this vested political interest in creating an idea of austerity. As if like all the shit that we deal with, like horrible jobs that burn us out and treat us like cogs in a machine, world hunger, people without homes, gentrification as a solution to like low income areas where it's like, oh, we're just coming in and saving them by like creating a space to create more profit for the people who already have money and can afford to like move there. You know, all these things that we're just like are so normalized and like, well, it's just inevitable because there's just not enough to go around. So some people have to be winners and some people have to be losers. That whole idea would be just like abolished, which it would take the work to abolish it, right? Like it would take counter narratives, it would take counter strategies. But basically, in essence, and this is coming from a position, I did feel like it was important to say, it's obvious probably to anyone who's listened to any of our episodes, but we're all coming from such different perspectives, not only from our lived experiences, but also like the materials we've absorbed. So Vincent has absorbed a lot of socialist and Marxist theory and texts. I actually haven't. I'm interested in that, and that's one of my like 2021 reading goals, is like absorbing more of that material. Kevin hasn't, and as he already mentioned, like his background, right? But just me having not read that work, my initial thoughts are like, it would probably mean that there's some sort of like requirement for like certain practical things that have to happen for societies to function that everybody participates in. But then outside of that, but it's not from an austerity model. It's from viewing like we actually have all the resources we need if we weren't so brainwashed into thinking we don't, and into the ways that we think of relating to, again, the other animals and the earth around us.
And to define austerity, or what do you mean by austerity?
Austerity as in like a lack, like we're taught that there's just not enough. You know, a good example is the episode that we ended up not releasing because we lost it, but we did an episode on hunger, and just the fact that so many people think hunger exists because there's not enough food to go around, as opposed to recognizing we produce 1.5 times the amount of food needed to feed everyone on earth. Meanwhile, we throw away about a third of all food we produce. Even that's just one like tiny example that's easy to glaze over, but if you actually engage with it, it's like, oh my God, what are the implications? Like, and actually something Vincent said, which is what the community decides is important, and creating the space for the community to decide what is important. Because we did also mention this idea that we are born into society and think that, oh, well, this must be what the collective decided is good and best, when that's really not true. It's what a very, very, very small, very powerful, very rich portion of society has decided is important and has normalized for all of us, which call back again to the idea of creating space to just think about, like, what do I think is important? What do I think is beautiful? What do I, as Kevin was talking about, like the necessity of yearning, not just like what sounds nice, but what do I yearn for? What does my soul thirst for? And so in closing, I think that probably a good starting point is looking at indigenous cultures as teachers. Yeah.
You know what's funny? Like hearing, so to try to provide a level of nuance and complexity in the conversation, I was trying to take what Leslie was saying and then provide a contrasting idea or a counter argument. And the thing I came up with is like, she's right. There's a rule of thumb in which by the community should have the determining decision on what's necessity and what's important and what's vital to the greater good and to the whole. And so with that idea, then I think of there's a conversation that I was privy to within fashion and within art because of Kanye West, where this idea of within fashion, he was talking about H&M. One of the models of H&M was like, in the fashion world, there was this opinion and this stigma that the general population didn't have good taste. And then H&M said, no, I think they have good taste. They just don't have access to affordable options. So H&M came in and there was this very affordable price points to a lot of articles of clothing that were made with a good design. And it was like, that's why H&M, you know, and they outperformed a lot of high-end fashion houses like Gucci, like Louis Vuitton, like Chanel, like they came in a matter of years. H&M and Zara, just as Kanye West would say, outperformed these fashion houses because they moved with.
H&M, like most fast fashion, uses sweatshops, right? I don't know if you're moving toward that, but yeah, it's like,
Well,
the community wants, it has good taste, and you know, the community is fine with that taste coming cheaply because we literally enslaved children.
Leslie spewing propaganda. That's false. Anyway,
it's not.
So it's false. It's false. You ain't got facts.
I didn't know if you were going there or not.
What does Trump say? Fake news. Fake news. So no. So there's that argument of like, yeah, in that realm, there's this idea of like, no, people aren't stupid. The masses aren't stupid. You just need to provide them with the resources to be able to. But then within music, right? Like Kanye and I'll use Kanye as an example.
Maybe the masses are stupid because, well, never mind. Actually, sorry, cut that. Never mind.
We're not cutting that. We're not.
Keep that.
Vince, I got you. We keeping it.
Kevin! Okay, sorry, go ahead.
But there's this idea within music where like, there has to, in my opinion, within hip hop music and rap music, and anyone can disagree, within hip hop music and rap music, as someone who is a songwriter, who is a poet, who has been obsessively involved with hip hop music for the past 18 years of my life, nearly 2 decades. The masses should not be allowed to determine what is going to be the new sound, the new wave, the new trend, the new way of doing things within hip hop music. It should be the elite, the Futures, the Kanyes, it should be the few. It should be the top 1% that get to push sound, the genius. And I'm not talking about economically.
You're saying you believe this, or you're saying a viewpoint?
I believe this. It shouldn't be the economic elite. I'm saying the artistic elite. I'm saying the ones who.
The whole artistic canon is so fraught, though.
I know, but again, this is my opinion. Like, who I consider.
Sorry, let me stop.
Because there is a general consensus within hip hop who is the artistic elite. Your Jay-Z's, your Kanye's, your Futures, your Dre. There is a sense and even recently Kid Cudi's. Meg Thee Stallion, Cardi B, like even the teams around them, and also like it's funny, like not to disagree with Leslie's point, but to counter Leslie's point.
Disagree.
There's no like Leslie. I named these names, and I think people who would resonate with Leslie's point don't take into consideration any woman who is in the room of these artists who are writing their songs. So when I say Jay-Z, when I say Kanye West, when I say,
is about to throw hands at you.
When I say Future, when I say Drake, when I say Kanye, when I say all these names, even Beyonce. Oh, there's women. Beyonce. There's women in those rooms influencing the writing of those songs. So these artists are just the vessel by which these songs get to be delivered. but it's a community effort that by which these albums are delivered. So within art, I have an opinion that there's a song that says, you'll give us what we need. It may not be what we want. I forget what popular fucking white song it is, but it says, oh, you'll give us what we need. It may not be what we want. There's this idea, you'll give us what we need. It may not be what we want. Because if the masses if the pop charts, if Billboard 100 gets to decide what's needed, then we're going to continue to de-evolve. You need pioneers, you need vanguards, you need forward thinkers, you need artistic elites, not economically, artistic people who are just endowed and born with this, and that's indiscriminate of class, race, creed, color, economics.
Is it though? What we decide who is endowed with these things?
Yeah, because Kanye born into poverty in the south side of Chicago.
Yeah, but that's one person.
Okay, so Jay-Z born in Marcy Pride. Think of hip hop. I'm not talking about rock. I'm not talking even within rock and roll. Think about all the artists in America who came to fame. It wasn't rich people born in, at least with hip hop. It wasn't rich people. Think of Future. Think of Jay-Z. Think of Drake. Think of Kanye. Think of Nicki. These people came up in fucked up conditions. They were colored people. Sure. There's a reason why. And even basketball players or NFL players, they came up in fucked up. But I'm talking about music right now. So it's because art isn't afforded to those who can afford the education. Someone who becomes a successful hip hop, rap star today in 2020 isn't because they went to a 4-year degree and they could afford class and afford access to resources like a Simi Valley Tech person. It's someone who,
in a contemporary sense, I could see that. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. I'm speaking for right now, 2020.
Wait, can I ask? I'm curious because I think there's something interesting there. What do you mean by the masses can't make these decisions? What does that look like? The masses
Billboard 100 radio, Billboard 100 and radio. Go look at Billboard 100 right now.
So you mean that profit shouldn't be making this like the most profitable?
No. What gets the most spins? What's programmed on radio?
Spins equals profit in the way that our system is constructed.
But it's not because the radio, those songs, some of these songs that are played on radio on Billboard 100 isn't because it's making money. It's because companies are trying to get that single to go.
Because they want to make money.
In the future, but right now in the current, it's not like, oh, this is making money, so let's put money behind it. No. This artist, nobody fucking knows about them. They're a plant. We pull them out of some weird middle American town, and we're trying to like
we can construct into something.
We're trying to make them, so it's not necessarily because there's already money coming in. There's a hope and a desire, and a lot of these artists and a lot of these songs never fizzle out into capitalism, never fizzle out into money made, never fizzle. So a lot of these attempts that radios make to push songs never fizzle out into actual profit. They go into the red. A lot of concerts go into the red. A lot of singles go into the red. A lot of artists and their songs and their albums go into the red. They don't go into the black. They don't make money. They go in debt.
Right.
There's a lot of music.
No, I mean that's just market logic. But I'm agreeing with the idea of the masses making the decision is really what the masses are interesting in purchasing, which is why I think it's interesting that we're here. I don't know. I just think it's an interesting thing you brought up.
You need to explicate your point more than saying that it's interesting, because you tend to say that without fleshing out what you actually think.
Well, I think it's interesting because you said that you're speaking from a specifically capitalistic framework. But I think even as an artist, the inclination is to say what is most consumed and like most bought. It is profit. Like what is most Billboard Top 100 is the most bought music. Shouldn't be what directs how we produce, what we put our effort in producing. There's a way of approaching these things with better integrity, artistic integrity, that are divorced from profit. Obviously, maybe I'm forcing you into that point, but you're getting in orbit of that point, which I think is just interesting for someone with a different worldview to get to, which is why I like hearing that. So keep saying that.
Well, no, because again, the point that I'm pointing out is,
tell me.
There are certain realms, like socialistically,
fire department. His ear, Kevin.
Fire department.
Without forcing it into like a specific ideology. I think the ethos of it is something that resonates with me, even if I take it to a different place.
So let's give an example. Fire departments are a socialistic way of doing things that are successful. Hey, we all agree this thing should be paid by everyone, that it could benefit everyone.
Isn't that just a metaphor, the fact that we agree that the
department that can be socialist is literally putting out fires as opposed to like actively
Police.
pushing
That's
toward
art.
good things.
Police are paid for by tax dollars. Teachers,
Ugh,
public education
yeah.
is paid for by tax dollars. Like there are certain and we agree that there's a certain ideology, there's a certain way of thinking of like, man, this should be the way with healthcare. Other countries do this. Why can't we do this? And the masses are kind of like are jockeying like this should be the way this is. With as an artist, I look and I go, name any concert. I don't give a fuck who it is, where it's more than 60,000 people, which is a stadium concert. Your Taylor Swift's, your Shawn Mendes, your Justin Bieber's.
Fucking Shawn Mendes. Ugh.
Name your Billboard top 10.
Just kidding, because
Any,
Kevin likes him.
in the realm of art, I don't agree that the masses should if artists not if, fuck if. When artists look at Billboard and mimic music within hip hop, within R&B, within the music and the cultures that I love and attach myself to. When those artists look at Billboard and look at what's popular and successful and trending among the masses, because the masses are drawn to it, music.
Masses being short for the mass consumer, yes.
Yes. It retrogrades and it de-evolves into a very fucked up state. And you need people who change the culture. At a point in time, gangster rap was popular, and that was what was trending, and Kanye came in and changed the wave. At a certain time and point, it was rapidy rap, and Drake came in and changed the wave. At a certain point, R&B sounded the way it did, and The Weeknd came in and changed the way. You need the few, the talented, the gifted. You need the top 1% is such a weird way to put it. You need the few, the handful who are truly gifted and talented in that space within hip hop music and R&B to come in, because it is a very timely game. We can't play this game where, well, we appreciate your art 200 years. Go fuck yourself 200 years after the fact. We want that shit bumping in the club now. And so you need people, the few and the elite, artistically, not economically, because there's a certain class conversation within that's connotated within an economic class elite. I'm talking artistically. You need the elite to come in and to create a newness and an innovation and a vanguard and a pioneering of a way of doing things. And you cannot let the masses within hip hop culture dictate what you think is going to be the thing to continue to do. You can't. Because whenever it's done, it's fucked up.
I don't agree with the framing of it as the elite, but I agree with the framing of, I think that elite implies up and down. I would say the people who, instead of in a vertical sense, are going horizontally deeper into what informs what we think of as what gets bumped up versus what tends to not pick up mainstream recognition.
And
do you hear me? As an artist?
I admit that I still call those people elite, but I understand anyone who disagrees with that wording and that usage and that verbiage.
Well, but I'm not just disagreeing to disagree. Like, I'm really curious, you as an artist, like, do you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, you wouldn't place artistic caliber on a scale that can be measured in a way to be defined by the word elite.
Right.
But I just don't see it that way.
I guess to me, it's like a broader conversation. It's not just art, but it's like an educational conversation too. Like in my utopia, well, first of all, there's just a lot more leisure time, right? So to like be clear, we'd be working like maybe a couple hours a day, since we can afford it with our technology, as opposed to automating everything and then firing people to save money. How about we just automate and then make everyone work less for the same pay? So in theory, there's a lot more leisure time. So people that are inclined to do artistic endeavors have the space to fully explore. But to me, I don't know, my brain, I haven't really sussed out more than that. Like I definitely wouldn't subscribe to like the idea of there being elites that have any sort of like ownership over what artistic endeavors look like. Obviously there's the people that are just going to be the best at what they do. And, I think that is what it is. I don't know. I haven't really got to a mental place where I'd imagine a world where we need like a vanguard of artists to tell the masses what is quality and what is not quality. But I think that doesn't necessarily mean that their word doesn't matter, right? Like the Oscar Wilde that we mentioned, or like James Baldwin, who I thought the quote was from, like he's not the vanguard of like philosophy. I don't know, like to me, like that whole structure of like being told down seems counterproductive to get to a society where things are completely equitable. But I mean, I haven't really sussed out more in my utopia what society's relationship with art would be. The one small thing, not related to this conversation, that I've always thought of driving in LA, is just how insanely there's just so many fucking billboards everywhere, and it's like these are fucking canvases. Like, why are we selling these for advertisements and not commissioning artists just to put art everywhere in these billboards? Like, how sick would that be? And there are some exceptions. There's some like video billboards in K-Town and downtown that are pretty cool. But that's probably the only very tangible thing that I would change. Like, fuck advertisements. Like, we should be using this to commission art. There should be more public art everywhere. Think about, again, the West likes to fucking fetishize the Greeks and the Romans, and we love their architecture. But today, like, people that pursue the arts are seen as like a waste of time. Like, in my utopia, there'd be a greater focus on just beautifying everything that we do, the spaces that we work and live in. But that's as far as my imagination has gone.
Yes. Well, I really valued both of the things you said. And Kevin, just to be clear, I wasn't pushing back because I was meaning to like I was trying to actually extend the conversation, and so I'll just share some of my thoughts. Which I think what you started tapping into, as we always say, could be its own 10-episode series. But
Bottomless.
we're talking about basically a question that we figured we would want to get into, which is the role of artists and art in utopian considerations. And I'll try to I'll try to respond to what pinged off of both what you said. And I think that the role of artists in society is simply to engage in whatever ways that they are innately drawn to or decide that they want to develop in themselves, and then manifest not even objects, because they're performance artists, right, where their work is inherently meant to be ephemeral and meant to not be able to be canonized and captured, that in a way that gets added to the narrative of like what art is and how humans engage with it. But I think that their role is to engage, and it tends to be in a way that disrupts the status quo, and it tends to be, even if it doesn't disrupt, it provides alternative perceptions in a way that people can more clearly bounce off of, rather than just interacting with other humans, right? So when we engage with art, we're not just engaging with something that is divorced of context. When we engage with art, we are engaging with things that humans have particularly manifested through the combination of their perception and experiences in the world. And so I think that when we engage with art, we're essentially just engaging with the practice of empathy. We're engaging in the practice of putting ourselves through in somebody else's perspective, and B, it connects to this idea that Ocean Vuong, oh man, I meant to look up his name before, that way I could say his last name right and make sure I was, but Ocean Vuong, who is, oh God, I also meant to look up, I think he's Vietnamese, he might be Philippine. Anyway, he's an incredible writer, an artist, and he put actually on an Instagram story, which I very much enjoyed, he wrote about some of his thoughts about metaphor, and one of them was boiling down to this idea that the root of a good metaphor is like care. And he didn't write this, but I knew what he meant. And what he means is that when you are given a metaphor where you say, this is this, think of any metaphor, right? Like, my mind is a river, her hair is I don't know what a good metaphor for that is. A man is a dog, a woman is a snake, whatever, right? Like, when you are given a metaphor, you experience either a quick, easy connection that through conditioning or through your innate sensibilities you can quickly understand, or it's a stretch and you're forced to think, wait, I'm being told that in some sense, at least in one person's mind, it makes sense to equate these things and that it has meaning. There's valuable meaning there, right? In the exercise of comparing two things as synonymous, which even though I know they're not, right? Any good metaphor, you resonate because it's like, oh, I see the connection in these two disparate things that we don't think of as being the same. And so if you carry that to its conceptual endpoint, metaphor is the act of understanding that everything is connected. You could put any metaphor out, and if you do enough work, you could actually find a meaning for it, no matter how bad it is, no matter how disparate the two elements seem to be. You could connect any two things that you're told this is this if you did enough. And obviously there's there can be a way to abuse that, but there is such a potential for increased empathy in every sense of the word, not just with other humans. Empathy in the sense of understanding another perspective, whether that's the perspective of the moss in the forest or whatever, you know? So that's what I think that the artist's role in society is. And just to reply to Vincent and Kevin. So first, Kevin, like what I meant to say when I said I don't agree with the framing of it as elite being the determiners of good art, it's because I think of it as engagement, not hierarchy, in the sense where I was saying instead of it being vertical, it's horizontal, because maybe people who are putting out things that skyrocket to the top of the billboard, because what tends to be popular is what we have been, the more, there's so many ways this conversation could go, but the more you receive input, we tend to like things that we're familiar with, right? And
Yes,
what it
without
tends to be in a capitalist society, that once again, the further along the timeline you get, more and more and more prioritize a smaller and smaller selection of people, which now has come to include representation, right? It's come to include people of color, it's come to include women, but the entire structure that representation is now being introduced into was informed by a foundation built on white men being canonized as what our art history is. You know, you have ancient civilizations that were like, oh, the cave paintings, but once we start really getting serious about it and like, what's art, and like, you know, how do humans think about things, and how has it been manifest in painting and music and literature, it's white men dominated. And only recently there's more of, you know, there's representation but you have to acknowledge the fact that the system that representation has been introduced into, and what even makes sense of like, well, what's good enough to enter this, and like what's important, like it's informed by a canonization that is so hierarchical and so wildly off base with the majority of humanity. And I'm talking about Western art canonization. So anyway, all that to say, where was I getting with this? Like, yes, there are people who choose to engage and have certain innate capacities to engage maybe more in certain ways than other people. But I don't think artists are the elite of society. I think that artists have certain giftings that allow them to engage into spaces that tend to resonate with more people than other ways of engaging deeply into spaces. And even that in itself, I think that that's true. But also it doesn't mean that their ways of engaging more horizontally into spaces is more important than like scientists or mathematicians or any other way that you can engage in life. And that's why I think my idea of utopia fundamentally comes back to the idea of limitless engagement and room for that, and room to do that yourself and receive and reciprocally like synergistically connect with people who are engaging in other ways, because there's no way any one of us can experience all the beauty there is to do in one life. But if there's a society where everyone is allowed and encouraged, and there's like empowerment to engage in the ways, again, that are both innate and that they just want to, like, can you imagine like the possibilities of 80 years on life, what we get to experience here together? Like, forget about just the basic needs being met. Like, if we wanted to, we could solve that like so easily. Like, there's so much more that we could, you know, like Vincent said, like billboards with art, like it's not just a nice idea because, like, you know, on such a basic level, there's been research, like if they paint hospitals certain colors, like the recovery rates are so much faster, right? And it's like, we think of that as like this mind-blowing, like, oh my God, wow, I guess like beauty is important to humans. It's like, it's not just beauty. It's like we're meant, like there's so much more that we can, right? Like, we're not just meant to like recover from an illness, like we can fly. All right, I don't know how long I was talking.
You said limitless engagement. I'm having a hard time imagining what that means. What would that look like in theory? Like like day to day as an artist, you wake up on Monday and it's like time for some fucking limitless
Well, I think
engagement.
that it has to do with everything that we've said. It means, and again, this is me doing what I said earlier about dreaming outside of the context of all the practicals, right? Of how we would get there. But I do see practicals, which would require, like you mentioned, education, like how educated are we and what do we focus on? Like what do we prioritize in metaphorical stock markets or like metaphorical press conferences? And it means waking up in a society where, yes, like the idea of profit as an indicator of success is abolished, and that in itself like creates the space for a kind of engagement that already would be so much more with everyday life, with anything, you know, than we currently have. And it also means like, yeah, not we are at the point where we don't need to be working 40-hour work weeks, let alone like some people work like 80-hour work weeks, you know, just to have our basic needs met. So it just means like,
Are still not having their basic needs met.
yes. Does that make sense? Like, I mean, I could there's just an infinite number of ways that limitless engagement could look, because there are an infinite number of like human hearts and psyches and um desires.
I have thought a lot about what religion ideally means in a society. It's been like a long journey, to be honest, on how I feel about the current religions that are in our society. And again, I respect people's religious practices and their faith, but I respect it with also the acknowledgement that I think some of it um, can serve as a detriment to getting to the places that we've described in this conversation. Like admitting that there is a material utopia that we can work towards, right? Like obviously if you believe in like an afterlife and there's like a heaven type place, like that's a separate conversation. But for me, I think religion would as an atheist, religion would absolutely be a part of my utopia, but it's religion in a more loose sense of um almost like a living myth, and it's a myth that we construct with our values baked into it, right? So it's maybe some sort of it's like it's Santa Claus. It's like back to our Santa Claus conversation. Like clearly this isn't real, but it's a useful avatar that we tell stories about to each other, knowing that it's fake. And that would be my religion, right? So maybe like an origin story that's rooted in like some sort of synergistic approach to Earth and our resources, and having like I don't know, like Mother Gaia figure. And we would propagate that, not because we want people to literally believe there's a physical Mother Gaia that created the Earth, but out of trying to steer the collective cultural like perspective towards appreciating Mother Earth. And that would be kind of going back to the way that we control for all these things that matter to us, creating living myths that can speak to those things, so that as society continues, as we have offspring, we can carry down, like, to me it's a vehicle for carrying priorities and the things that we value. So yeah, is that abstract or is that granular enough?
I don't think it has to be one or the other. It makes sense to me.
What Vince is
I
saying
love
is that
that. It makes
art
total sense.
imitates life, and he's
Listen to
wrong.
the Bottomless podcast. Well, on that note, I have to say, I didn't know where we were going with this episode. Wasn't disappointed. But I think, I mean, I already said it, but I do think it's really exciting to have these conversations in general, but especially with people that have like different worldviews than me. I just think it's very stimulating, and it's also kind of heartwarming too, because we're thinking of like when we complain about shit, it's like we're putting the hyper focus on the worst of each other and the people that we're around and our culture, our society. But this conversation, for the most part, was really focused on, I don't know, like the best of each other in our society and the things that we love. And I don't know, I don't think I do that enough. So I very much enjoyed it. Do you guys have any parting thoughts?
I very much enjoyed it too. I appreciate you guys in my life very much.
Whose turn is it to
Leslie,
take us out?
All right. Well, thank you for listening to the Bottomless Podcast, and you can subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify. Wait, let me start over.
You know where to find
Spotify.
us.
You know where to find us.
You can subscribe
Anyway,
on Spotify.
It's okay. Yeah. We're also on Twitter and Instagram. It's spelled BTTMLESS. And thank you so much as always for listening and giving us space in your lives.
Bottomless.